Mute is set in a world where verbal communication has been outlawed. It's controlled and enforced by the Spectrum Corporation, a kind of fascist, advertisement-laden world where the average person doesn't have any rights anymore. It's the story of Charlie, who's a young film enthusiast who works for the company, and he kind of keeps himself to himself. And it's his gradual involvement with a woman called Mandy, who's on the run from Spectrum, who's set up these underground clubs, which are speakeasies basically, which are an opportunity for people to speak out against the conditions they live in. And as Spectrum become aware of these clubs, it's only a matter of time before their lives are in serious danger. I'd always wanted to make a silent film for the challenge, but there's no way of justifying doing that without it seeming self-indulgent. It was just a case of finding a concept that justified the challenge that would come with it. The idea for Spectrum, the corporation, who are a conglomerate of the 5 biggest companies in the world, that came about from hearing about TTIP and the Snoopers Charter and the various restrictions that kind of thing would bring about. You know, being at the whims of a corporation and losing personal freedoms, I think is a terrifying idea. At first, the idea of outlawing speech relates to the current trend of, stopping political protests, preventing people speaking out against the government or against groups of people. But the idea for Mute was always more of an intimate one for me. It was always about our inability to communicate with one another. The majority of the characters in the film fail to get across what they're thinking or feeling, and most of the time that results in them missing opportunities. If this kind of enforcement were to take place, they'd be killing you with smiles basically, pretending everything's okay all the time, reassuring people that everything's fine, that these horrible things aren't happening. People would just disappear and you wouldn't know what would happen to them. I wanted it to be quite vibrant, so the opposite of what we're used to with dystopian futures, kind of bleak, desaturated worlds where everything's grim, whereas the reality is it's like you're living in an advert where it's kind of everyone's pretending everything's ideal, but it's really not. Everything's horrible basically. Everyone's pretending everything's okay and they're terrified of speaking out. I think Mute's an example of what's achievable with minimal resources. This is the biggest film we've ever made, but with a budget that's only a little bit bigger than what we had before. I think the concept's what draws people in, but it's the characters and the intense situations they're in that hooks people in and engages them throughout. It's a blend of love story, absurd humour, political thriller and intimate family drama. As far as I'm concerned, there's not really any other film like this out there at the moment.